Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Lifestyle Mastery, and today I'm excited to have Alexandra Vidyuk, who's a space tech venture partner at Aloniq. She's a founder at it named Beyond Earth. And it's a real pleasure to have Alexandra on the show. Welcome to the show, Alexandra.
Hi, Rohit. Thank you so much for having me today.
Awesome. It's always great to speak to speakers whom I've met in person before. So I had a pleasure to meeting you during the summer. Before we talk about how do you get in this world of how did your journey start in the world of startups and ventures?
Yes, sure. I'm new to VC and startup area. I only started doing it like 3 years ago. Before I was in banking.
Yeah.
And I think at some point of my career in banking, I had like very nice, glamorous life in London and Hong Kong. And I realized lack of impact or just I needed some change. So when I finished my degree, I studied physics. Half
Mm.
of my class went to work for management consulting companies such as McKinsey, Bain, so on, and half went to work for banking. So I think I was one of them who did banking. But then 10
Nice.
years later, and I was like, okay, I need to change something. I think COVID, depression didn't help as well. So I was kind of thinking a lot, reflecting a lot. And I decided to do my startup in fintech.
Okay.
That was quite successful. I raised first round. We got the license, got first revenue, first product. Still, I mean, I stepped down as executive like founder, so I'm more like
Nice.
an advisor now. But it's kind of progressing now, generating revenue and so on. So and then later, I think after that, I really liked the area of where you speak a lot of founders and VCs. It's a different energy, different ambition. I like people who have vision. I like drive. I like energy. Then I was like, okay, but since like finance and fintech still not exactly my area, so and I took summer off and I reflected a lot about what were my childhood dreams, why I wanted to study physics, and generally thought about a lot about what kind of books I liked when I was a kid. And the answer came to me as a deep tech and space tech VC, and that came naturally, and that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to talk about space tech because, when I met, I thought space tech is all about, sending satellites and all that. But you talked about your banking experience. How was your experience at HSBC? Because you were at a very senior leadership role over there. And how did it turn into, lead into your involvement in space technology over there?
Yeah, sure. It's very different. It's
Yeah.
basically no overlap. I guess the skills which I gained during my banking career definitely help now with, negotiation, financial analysis, stakeholder management, and generally common sense, I guess. Space tech was new for me, so I had to study from scratch. But it's also good in some sense because I have very fresh view. I look with my lenses of like I used to be a fintech founder, I used to be a banker, so the culture is very different. I have very different set of skills, which I think is complementary, and I can definitely influence or coach some people, founders in space tech industry about how it can be done in different ways.
Right.
So plus every day is a school day for me now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do enjoy it.
Correct. And Beyond Earth, focuses on both sustainability and space exploration, So how do you see that intersection with both sustainability and space expansion?
Yes, I think it's very related, very interlinked. So when people talk about space, it's not just rockets, right? It's not just
Yeah.
satellites. I think the industry is huge, and now it is projected to be 1 trillion industry by 2035, which like becoming one of the like top 10 industries in the world is fast growing, and like most of the people in space tech industry investors describe it as a hockey stick
Yeah.
growth, right? And we adjust at the early stage of this hockey stick. So that's why people say jump now, later will be too late, right? So, but it's interlinked with any other industries as well. So it's interlinked with agriculture, with pharmaceutical industry, with energy, climate, and so it's kind of enabling other industries. In the same time, it's also, you have a lot of startups which have both, in like we call it terrestrial applications and space applications. You have like two independent sources of revenue, which is great. We like this type of startups because you always have two markets. Let me give you example about intersections with climate
Right.
and sustainability. For
Right.
example, a lot of Earth observation, or in another words, it's satellite images or satellite sensors, which can
True.
scan, for example, distribution of greenhouse gases, right? So we don't actually know today
Yeah.
what are the emissions we have globally in real time on an asset level, for example, which factories or what are the parts of infrastructure actually have, for example, methane leaks, right? This only can be detected properly with satellites. You can also use drones, but you can mention drones are a bit expensive, difficult to manage, and so on.
Yeah.
So that's not one example. As of today, we have around, I think, around 40 different satellite constellations doing that.
Right.
Another example is energy, right? So there's a number of different energy startups. I think I saw maybe 10, which are trying to build kind of energy stations in space and beam it back to Earth, which is kind of sounds like a sci-fi movie, but it's probably one of the greenest source of energy you can think about. Imagine you have an energy station in orbit,
Yeah.
which has 24/7 solar energy. You don't need
Right.
to cool it down. You don't need to, there's no clouds, there's no
Right.
night, right? So you basically have uninterrupted supply, and then
Yeah.
you can use waves to send it down. Another example can be a number of startups are now doing data centers in orbit, which is,
Okay.
data centers, one of the biggest offenders for climate crisis, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
imagine you have data center which in orbit,
Mm.
so you don't have emissions on Earth. You have energy already there. It's
Right.
connected to the Starlink satellites faster. And
Yeah.
also people joke, FBI cannot come and
Yeah.
arrest your data centers, right? So it's like extra security. So, and I think if you think about long term, and when we're going to run out of resources on Earth, maybe some rare Earth materials or something, then where we're going to find them? We're going to find them in space,
Mm.
maybe asteroid belt or something, or like something which we'll have to use maybe 50 years down the line or 100 years down the line. The
Right.
sources will be in space. Plus, at some point, when we will have a lot of infrastructure in orbit and the space industry will be much more developed,
Right.
ideally what you want to do is to kind of move up all the toxic productions to orbit and keep Earth nice and clean and green, like garden for life. That's
Right.
obviously probably not this century, but at some point that's kind of should be our eventual objective. Important as well that one of our current deals, for example, hydrogen energy, we're
Yeah.
talking about how to have green energy on Earth, but
Right.
it's also exactly the same. How are we going to use energy on the moon and on Mars?
Mm.
So that's also another kind of example of interception of these two areas.
Got it. Got it. Super interesting. Obviously, when it comes to space tech, I always think about Elon Musk. And I mean, when Elon thought that we'll all go to Mars, I somehow did not believe it. I mean, but if you look at Starlink, it's like a revenue generating machine for space tech now, and it's huge hats off to Elon. What he has built in the last couple of years. But what are some of the unique challenges faced by startups in the space industry, and how are you as a VC trying to address those issues?
Yes, for sure. Yes, and Elon definitely is one of the main drivers, and
Yeah.
Starship, and the recent updates about his Twitter post about we are going
True.
to go to the Mars in 2 years, sending Starship. This is truly amazing, and I think this is a main driver, and it's also a source of inspiration for so many founders.
True.
So space tech is very different from I don't think it's very different from deep tech industry,
Mhm.
but from, for example, like software or like B2B SaaS
Yeah.
startup, it's very there's a lot of risk, right? So we
Yeah.
not be considering always, is it scientifically possible? Is it engineering possible? Will
Yeah.
the team pull it off? Do we have enough regulation? Do we have problems with regulations? So I see that a lot of contracts are still government contracts. It's taking ages for startups to get accredited for them, to get into the relationship with space agencies, or government players. Still a lot of defense-related contracts as well. And then you have to be part of some specific nation and kind of be the person from this nation to be able to apply for these contracts. I think another what we all constantly see as well is most of the founders are coming from technical background,
Yeah.
either scientists or engineers or some kind of this type of people, right? So which are typically very good, very driven, very focused on the product and definitely know how to do it. But it's not natural for them to be founders, such as, go and do fundraising and go to do business development, right? So, and then people like me, people like you as well, that's basically our sweet spot, right? So how we can help them, coaching, give advice, introductions, kind of giving the kind of some tips how
Yeah.
to do that. We try to help a lot
Yeah.
our portfolio companies with that, and we see that this is something which is like one of the biggest gaps we see in the teams, something which would definitely help a lot.
Right.
But generally, it's not an easy industry, but it's
Mm.
definitely one of the most interesting and promising today. So we try to work around some of the issues which the industry has.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we see a lot of flux of AI startups and climate startups. But I think you one of the few VCs which are focusing on space tech, which is super interesting. And what is your criteria when you look at selecting startups to support your the venture building program at Beyond Earth?
Yes, sure. So I see that there is a lot of government money, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of money of enthusiastic VCs, enthusiastic investors in space
Right.
industry. Basically, that means that people deploying capital, obviously the government have no choice, but they have to support some of the critical kind of nation important projects. So this is a separate thing, and it's a good thing to do, right?
Right.
But there's a lot of people who invest in space because they think I watched this movie and I want to invest and so on. I mean, there's still a lot of capital like this, and it's a kind of a bit romantic, I guess, to do that. So
Yeah.
plus some of the VCs which we've met, they focusing on, they have a mandate. For example, most of the space tech VCs, they have government money involved, and then that give them a special mandate, so they have to limit themselves to a specific region, a specific type of startups.
Right.
So we don't have this. So we kind of our VC is independent, so my investment syndicate is also independent. So we're
Mm.
trying to look at your kind of normal startups, right? So in space tech, it's important to understand that traction is not exactly the same as other startups.
Mm.
So it's like we don't see like, people say, okay, series, like, series A, I want to see 1 million RRR or something, or by seed, I want to see 30K
Yeah.
MRR, right? So it's sometimes in space, it's not exactly the same.
Mm.
What we're looking is traction, but it's not exactly the revenue. It might be LOIs, MOUs,
Okay.
contracts for the future, government grants, uh, and so on. Anything which can prove us that there's a value chain which startup has place, and then there's going to be a big market. We look at the market, of course. Everything we target decacorn, right? This is the only way to go.
Right.
So try to do 100x on each deal, right? So that's our ambition. So has to be a big market. The bigger, the better. So in space industry today, there's not many big markets. Only 3 markets have 100 billion potential.
Mm.
So they always need to understand either why the market is not big or why we think it will have exponential growth.
Yeah.
We look at the team has to have right skills. If they don't have the right skills immediately in the team today, do they have the right advisors? Do
Mm.
they have the right board members? Do they have the right connections generally?
Right.
We look at which accelerators they went through. Obviously, there's like market leaders such as Techstars, Seraphim. In the UK, it's UK Space Agency, for example, right?
True.
We look at who are the investors
Yeah.
and what type of due diligence they conducted. So in some case, for example, we see some startups, you just trying to go through their IP and say, oh, we have another startup, another VC who just put a term sheet without any IP due diligence. Then it's also I understand there's different people have different ways to invest,
Right.
but for me, it's also super important to actually do a full due diligence.
Got it.
We try to understand scientific and engineering side.
Right.
Sometimes we do it by ourselves. We do have people on the team who have PhD in space technologies and so on. But obviously the area is so big, we have to sometimes call our friends, experts from like different parts of the industry to actually ask if this is the right way to do. So yeah, there's a lot of questions to ask founders. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. So, you've been also a part of another VC firm, which is Aloniq, and you're running Beyond Earth. How do you remove politics when it comes to investment decision making process when you're looking at making a decision on what investments should the venture partners get to make?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So it's a very, the area is very, it's a lot of involvement in
Yeah.
geopolitics and a lot of, national agendas, so and so on. So we sometimes try to take advantage of this if
Mm.
possible. So for example, if we see a big national grant system, a program which is sponsoring some of the startups or giving grants or contracts, that we try to focus on that ecosystem and try to see what we can, what can we predict. So for
Yeah.
example, program like Artemis, right, which like 93 billion program it's a nation, it's a multinational, right, but NASA-led program. So
Okay.
what kind of companies they choosing to invest to work with, so that can be potentially our targets, right? So that is of course a good thing. We can see that a lot of startups in space tech also have like how we call it, like a double like another side, which is a defense side, right? So in this case, if it's a security, we are fine with that, but we like against any kind of very 100% defense projects. This is kind of not our domain, and we also think sometimes it's like maybe unethical to invest. But it's definitely a big area now, a lot of people investing. So yeah, and we um, try to be neutral, try to invest globally. We always look for the best projects, and we don't invest in projects which have very specific, like one customer, for example, local government. Then
Yeah.
that's probably it's never going to become a unicorn, first of all, right?
True.
And second, the government can change tomorrow. What will
Yeah.
happen in that kind? What's a startup, right? So it's also unclear. And also, if the startup has a very specific IP or very
Yeah.
specific kind of contract which they cannot share with anyone else, then this is very limiting factor as well. So that's something which we understand the business, but it's not a venture business.
Hmm. Got it. Got it. Interesting. And as I mentioned at the start of the podcast, I had the pleasure to meet you in London, and you also, I also got to meet up with Katie King from BioOrbit. She had done a PhD, and she was super smart, super intelligent. But what excited you about BioOrbit? And she's making something really spectacular. But how do you get to do the due diligence on the deal? Because you based out of Singapore, and Katie is based here in the UK.
Yeah, so I met Katie in Singapore actually because she
Oh,
came as a Seraphim cohort
nice.
to to Singapore. Like they had like a road show here, and I came for a demo day. And Katie is amazing. BioOrbit is amazing. We think that this is a good example of a startup in space industry, which enabling other industry, in this case, pharmaceutical. The whole point about BioOrbit is that they can create protein crystallization in zero gravity in orbit, which means
Nice.
if you have complex molecules, such as, for example, antibodies, protein,
Yeah.
right? So they collapse under gravity on Earth, so they can only grow small. But if you do them in orbit where you have very little gravity, they
Yeah.
can grow more symmetrical, bigger, more pure, right? So what it means for like pharmaceutical industry, let's say if it's a cancer treatment, for example,
Yeah.
antibody cancer treatment,
True.
then for a patient, instead of going to a hospital every day and stay there for half an hour for a drip, you can actually do injection at home, like as a like a small injection, like as a diabetes people do.
Nice.
So that's a huge change for patients, obviously quality of life, but
Yeah.
also for the whole industry itself. So this is only available now because 10 years ago we could not do that. 10 years ago we didn't have Elon Musk with Starship and Falcon 9 Heavy. So the unit economic didn't work. But now this type of startups can exist because the business models now uh, everything has changed.
Nice.
So in terms of due diligence, so this is a pre-seed startup.
Yeah.
This is a lot of risk, right? So for us, we spoke to, like, obviously we studied the entire industry, all the competition, everything. We spoke to their Seraphim, the who were like the accelerator program they attended. We
Right.
spoke to both investors invested in previous round. We understood the dynamic. We understood the traction. We understood what the technology can do. What's the IP they have. What they don't have.
Nice.
And much, it's a pre-seed. Majority is a bet on the founder.
Yeah. True. True.
Honestly, right? So, and we
Yeah.
just believe in Katie. She's amazing. She's great. She's driven, super smart, well presented. So
Yeah. Yeah.
this is our bet.
Got it. Got it. No, absolutely. A lot of respect for what she's building, and she's pretty active on Instagram, and I really like the sort of content that she's building. And I was speaking to a couple of guests on the podcast, and I realized that I've been to tech startups where I've always worked with first-time founders. Now that is something which I did not knowingly do it, but maybe it's how it's been for me. But do you prefer serial or first-time founders, and why would be our reason?
So I don't think I have a strong preference, and I know some
Mhm.
of the other VCs only invest in like second-time founders, like
True.
first-time, like serial entrepreneurs. I think it's a bit unfair because
Yeah.
someone at some point invested in them previously, gave them a chance, right? So, and I remember when I was a first-time founder, like, and how
Yeah.
people looked at me, and I had to prove myself all the time. By the way, I read recently some of the reports on VC, like people use some AI to analyze the data from Crunchbase. And what they said, if a founder changing the industry, like after first exit to another industry, they most likely will fail.
Mm.
So again, we don't have that much data to actually kind of statistically analyze it, but there is of course there is, people have confidence, people know how to do stuff, but also what is their motivation. I think it's kind of, I think has to be done case by case, but
Yeah.
I think for me, first time founders, they probably have a bit better drive. It's the first
Mm.
time, it's exciting, it's like it's a bit scary, but of course it's like super, super scary. And I think they require more support as well,
Yeah.
of course. But so I mean, I think in our current portfolio, I would say 50-50
Okay.
of
Okay.
first
Okay.
time versus serial founders. Yeah.
Got it. Interesting. You made an interesting point about the Crunchbase data, but Yeah, I work with Ritesh Agarwal, who's a Thiel fellow who founded OYO Rooms and went on to raise around $4 billion from SoftBank. But he was very new to the problem, and he would always say that he would not want to hire people from the hospitality industry because they have those bias in their head, and he always wanted a different point of view. But do you prefer also when it comes to backing founders, do you prefer founders who are new to the problem or those who already have that insider information about that industry?
I don't think I have a very strong view here because I think I've personally, because I still think I'm an outsider for space industry.
Yeah,
So I think when you're an outsider,
yeah,
you have a bit more motivation to learn every day, and
yeah,
you have a bit like, there's like, I think this special effect, I don't remember how it's called, but then when you come to the when you come fresh,
yeah,
you might
yeah,
have better ideas than other. You don't have bias, right? So you
yeah,
might have something. You might have fresh ideas, which can. But obviously, people who are inside the industry, they lose it,
yeah.
being for several years. So, but also I've seen people who reinvented themselves, right? For example, people who ex-space agency people turned out to be a founder and very successful founders, right? So it's
Mm,
also very different kind of coming from a government agency and
yeah,
become a founder, right? So it's totally different game,
true.
right? So I like to think that our life, obviously, we like lifelong learning, and we will have to reinvent ourselves several times during our life. So, and
True,
I'm very
true.
open. I mean, I've done it. I moved from banking to space, right? Who
Yeah,
knows what will be the next one, right? So
true.
I think that we need to give chance to
Yeah.
both types of people. I try to be open-minded about that. I think it's important to look at the composition of the team as well.
Mm,
So if the founder maybe doesn't have enough depth of knowledge in specific industry, what about other co-founders? Do they have enough connections in the industry about who are their advisors, who are their board members, right? So that can be kind of closing the gaps in the team.
right. Got it.
So it's a combination, yeah.
Got it. Interesting. And but you back pre-seed and seed founders, but and a lot of VCs talk about prioritizing. It's all about the team. But how do you prioritize a founder or a market when you look at investing into a team?
Um, it's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it's like, again, there's no like black and white
Mm,
answer. So I think for me, if it like kind of if it's a good founder,
yeah.
would they look at the bad market, right? Would they set up something if it's like a market, for example, small and shrinking? Probably no, right?
Mm,
So I guess if it's a good founder, then they would know how to pivot, and
yeah.
they would know, okay, if the market is this one is shrinking or dying, then I'm going to look at another market. I pivot my product, and maybe I'll see what else I can do. I move the country, whatever, right? So there's many,
Mm,
many different ways. So, but also if you look at the market, and market like 100 billion, right? And then,
yeah.
but the founder maybe does have no critical thinking and
Mm,
cannot pivot, and will just have a small idea which will never grow. That also can be a problem, right? So I think you have to have both,
yeah.
but I don't know. I think the founder is I think the founder will choose the right market.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Interesting. And always I always come up with this example about Uber. Because when Uber started, nobody thought your when it comes to market sizing and market timing.
Sorry, you're just frozen for a second. Can you repeat
So
it again?
yeah, sorry. I was talking about Ubers.
Yeah.
They when they started off, we still not very clear about the market size. But what's been your biggest lesson when it comes to market sizing and market timing for startups?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think in space industries there is a lot of people who bet on the future markets, right? So say,
True.
okay, so now we don't have, for example, like robots in orbit flying and kind of fixing satellites, but in the future we'll have, right? It's obvious because
Yeah.
satellites will break down, right? We have to fix them. So,
Mm.
but I think people kind of make the assumptions based on, yeah, that's kind of logical thing to do, but then practicalities, right? So did you tell your customers about, okay, this is the possibility of robots fixing your satellites there or something? I'm making up exaggerating example here,
True.
but
True. True.
generally, right?
Correct.
It's
Interesting.
like, I think for me, even if you're trying to create the future, right? And people like space tech is a very visionary sector. A lot
True.
of people have big visions, big dreams, but it has to be, it's a fine line between people trying to have a big vision and people who are absolutely crazy and completely disconnected from the reality.
Mm.
So sometimes, honestly, it's difficult to understand. It
Yeah.
kind of sounds obvious, right? But in some cases, if you don't have enough knowledge about the industry and if you don't know the value chain creation, that can be quite not straightforward to understand.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's when people say like, oh, everyone will be using that. We have like 10,000 satellites in orbit. Of course, everyone needs that. Then yeah, that's okay. Let's just call a couple of people and ask if it's a real issue or not.
Correct. Correct. And um, I would say last 2 years have been challenging for emerging managers in the VC industry to raise funding. It's been even challenging for some of the funds to give back the money back to the LPs. But what do you know now that you wish that you known first we got into VCs, and any advice for emerging managers who want to get into this crazy world of VC?
Yeah, it's not like I have a lot of experience raising the funds in the last 2 years, but I think it's tough market, right?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to raise. I think for me, so space tech itself is very difficult. And then I think
Mm.
what I normally, when I say space, people always think, oh, you invest in rockets. And I have to explain that this is not just rockets, this is, there's enabling industries. And there's always, we try to look at projects which have several revenue sources, including
Mm.
not space. And yeah, so I kind of came to conclusion better to say deep tech, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm.
then it's a bit wider, people a bit
Yeah.
more comfortable. And
True.
I think everyone understands that deep tech is the next big chapter
Right.
of the VC investments. That's definitely kind of one of the biggest lessons, I guess, for
Yeah.
me. But
Correct.
I still say space tech because I like it, but I have to explain always to people.
Yeah, and I remember our conversation. That's how you also explained it to me, because I think the most famous person in space tech is Elon Musk, and he started off with SpaceX and now with Starlink. So you always think about rockets and satellites, and
Yeah.
and for the nerds, it's what how people relate to it. And obviously, I want to talk more about Elon, because Elon actually took on NASA, and he said like he can solve the problem of sending rockets by at 1/10 of the cost. So how do you see the role of private companies? You talked about BioOrbit and a few other of your investments in comparison to how government companies and government agencies contribute to space exploration and sustainability.
So if you look at 20 years ago, right? So most of the funding came through the government agencies
Hmm.
uh, to space. As of today, only 20% of funding is coming from government agencies, and like
Interesting.
the remaining 75, 80% is private, right? So the situation has changed a lot. And I think the government agencies, they should fund something which is still a research project, right? So, for
Okay.
example, what's the current Artemis program, which is the biggest space tech program today, global, which is a joint multi-nation program, multi-billion program, almost 100 billion.
Hmm.
So what they do is trying to build architecture on the moon, right?
Oh.
So they try to build energy station, logistics, network, monitoring stations and everything, right? So that doesn't make sense for people to build it by themselves, like for startups, right? So how you make money on this? So, but then when you have energy stations there, when you have some base, when you have some infrastructure, then you can actually think about building products and maybe, okay, let me see if I can harvest helium free, or maybe mine some minerals, or maybe do something else, and kind of it's exactly the same as Jeff Bezos was saying about when he built Amazon, he already had internet and the post. So
Yeah,
he only sell books on an internet, right? So I think for me that the infrastructure and research projects probably is the government funding responsibility, and also, all the missions which we send, like, kind of to other planets and everything. This is all research, kind of getting information, getting data,
yeah,
then other people can use it later. So good example is ISS, International Space Stations, conducted 2,600 experiments last 24 years, right? So including everything, so many different things, including protein crystallization, which we talked today about. But most of these experiments, this is documented. There's a database open for everyone, and you can check the results.
right.
How to do semiconductors in space, how to do organoids, how to do stem cells,
Interesting.
embryos, so many materials, biochemical experiments, whatever. So, and it's just open. So what people do is they go look at it and say, okay, let me actually check the market, unit economics. Can I find the right team members, and then go start fundraising, right? So that's kind of now some entrepreneurs already think differently. So, but this is exactly a good example of government funding helped to have this
Mm,
database of experiments.
got it.
But it's why would private companies do that, right? So it doesn't make sense. So
Yeah.
this is a good example.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. And obviously, a lot of founders are getting into the AI bandwagon because a lot of VCs are also investing into AI. And obviously, OpenAI has built a product which a lot of us are using. But what advice would you give to aspiring founders and entrepreneurs who are listening to this podcast on, what advice would you give to them if they want to enter into the space sector?
Space sector, yeah. So I think most, like, a lot of people come to me and say, oh, I I'm not a rocket scientist. How can I be part of the movement, right? So actually, exactly what we discussed before, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. It might be actually better if you're not.
Yeah.
Maybe it's better if you found someone who is a rocket scientist and become a co-founder and try to do a startup. Or you can always become an investor first, like, angel investor, obviously, welcome to our syndicate, but also kind of monitor the industry for a couple of years and then to see if there's a specific area you like. And by the way,
Yeah.
you don't have to become VC or founder, right? There's like each big company is hiring people like accountant, marketing people, finance
Cool.
people, right? So you don't have to be exactly an engineer or something. You just have a normal job and work for a space company if this
Mm,
is the industry you like. So, but it's, I think generally, I always say that sometimes we don't understand how space industry can enable us. And like, for example, now I used to work in banking, right? And so now in banking, people use a lot of satellite imagery for,
mm,
you know, commodities trading,
yeah.
insurance products, monitoring of assets, disaster recovery, everything, right? So this is the best way to monitor, and even mortgage approvals.
Mm.
So I didn't know about that when I was working in banking. So, but it's kind of can simplify some of the operations. So for sure, yeah.
Got it, interesting. And I have actually also tried to build a syndicate, but I failed to get a lot of LPs. In fact, I ran a summit called Angel Summit. I got some really interesting VCs on the part, but I wasn't able to get to a syndicate. But you've been running Beyond Earth for some time, and you got good number of LPs. Any advice for operators or founders or somebody who wants to get into VC world? a lot of them start a syndicate. What advice would you give to them on how to start a syndicate and how do you get the right sort of LPs backing that syndicate?
Yeah, so we got more than 500 people in our syndicate in just over like 4 months.
Nice.
So which I think is a great, it's a great track record, but none of them are investing. Some of them just kind of asking us questions and still kind of looking, which is okay. They
Yeah.
need some time to understand what's going on, what is the kind of process, and to trust us. So
Nice.
obviously our initial, like our closest network of people, friends, people
No.
from
Okay.
other VCs, angel investors we know, that's kind of our immediate target, which we invited. Co-syndication helped a lot. So we work with
Nice.
our other syndicates, kind of, the biggest one on angel list, such as, I don't know, we work with Rob Ness, for example.
Oh,
And we do co-syndication. That's kind of have 150 syndicates we are in touch with for each deal, and we kind of negotiate which one will give us the best condition. We do webinars, master classes, kind of
mm,
to talk about space tech, to talk about angel investments, bring our LPs to tell their stories, to bring founders to pitch. So it's kind of every time we have 20, 30 people, kind of on a masterclass. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less.
nice.
So they that helps, and kind of more like probably to warm up people to the idea of space tech investment. So just after each pitch session, we had a lot of commitments. So that's typically the good way. LinkedIn advertisement, just
Right.
kind of target people uh, who you see, like they say, space tech interests, or somehow they kind of, you can put all these filters, right?
Got it. Got it. Interesting.
Venture partners, we
Yeah.
have several. I think we have almost like 5 or 7 now, covering different areas, different regions. So they are our representative. For example, we have people in in the US who is looking at the US market, and they say, okay, I'm covering this area, so I'm going to all the events and presenting you as our as a kind of all the deals there. So obviously we have to be very careful because of the general solicitation. We cannot post any direct links to the deal.
True.
Social media has to be very careful with what we post and how we post. So
Yeah. True.
Angel List gives us a very good guidance about that. So this
Okay.
is protected. But
Yeah.
what else? Yeah, I do have a blog. It's a
Nice.
15,000 subscribers blog on Substack, which I do mention sometimes, syndicate, and people read it, people join, something like that as also. But it's kind of, I still don't know one winning strategy. It's not like
Mm,
I can say 99% of LPs came from that source.
right.
That's I think it's kind of multiple strategies. And I think obviously it's, I think recommendation on, kind of word of mouth, people come,
Yeah.
if someone
True.
say, oh, I like these deals, you want to join. So I always try to, and we do cast dev as well. So we actually call our LPs and ask, hey, tell us, we do like, so I'm going to Milan next week. So it's the
Yeah.
biggest space tech conference, which called
Interesting.
IMT, and then I'm hosting a cocktail like for 50 investors. So I just found like all angel investors in Milan, send them the link, said, come for our
Nice.
cocktail. So we're just going to be like, I put my t-shirt and just say, hey guys, we want to talk about space tech.
Nice. Nice.
So,
Yeah.
so, yeah, so it's different. I mean, it's like, please tell me if you know better strategies. I would like to know as well. I think,
I actually ran a summit, and I had only two people come as an LP. So maybe I'm not the best person to take advice on how to get LPs, but I do invest into tech startups. I've had a lot of syndicate leads who've come on the podcast, be it Ali Jamal or be it Peter Livingston, and you have also been kind enough to come on the pod. So I think AngelList is a great platform, but we also have a lot of syndicates out here in the UK. And I think there are a lot of interesting platforms like Sidecar, Crowdcube, Seeders. But I think AngelList is the most well known. And I've been fortunate enough to take to invest in a few of these investments. But I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
Favorite's a difficult question, but recently I read Psychology of Money, which actually really helped me to um, understand, like this is like, some of the, we can't predict everything, right? Especially
True.
in venture investments, right? So it's kind of made me a bit more calm. Now I'm reading Venture Mindset, which probably should have read long time ago, but I'll tell you later how it goes. Yeah.
Correct. We'll put down the show notes. And if you could go back in time when you started at Beyond Earth's technologies, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done thing differently?
I would start syndicate earlier, I
Yeah,
think.
correct. And do you have any favorite online tool, for example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
ChatGPT.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think ChatGPT is also one of my favorite tools. So we'll put that in show notes. And Alex, what's the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Beyond Earth?
My LinkedIn, my
Yeah.
Twitter, my email, anything. Yeah.
Got it. We'll put down in show notes. Alex, thank you so much for taking your time and speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Thank you, Rohi. Thanks for having me. I had fun.
Thank you.